Oxford Group, the largest Brazilian consulting firm in the United States, for over 40 years presents Economy and You. Brought to you by LIF, Ferreira Araujo Attorneys at Law. 3 decades of experience in immigration in the United States.
Good evening, dear listeners. Today we have more than just a program, a challenge. How are we going to manage during the normal duration of our program to learn so much? All of us economists, administrators, business managers face a basic problem, which is the changes, the revolutions that occur in management, and which, particularly for us who are somewhat affiliated with Peter Drucker, well, we are always frightened by that idea that tomorrow everything we learned yesterday is no longer valid. And today we are very fortunate to have with us to help guide us through these many doubts and concerns of ours, perhaps one of the most well-known and widely recognized individuals in the entire world within the field of management. Áureo Villagra is known worldwide for the innovations he has brought to companies, for the way in which his company, his guidance has served as a solution so that each company can differentiate effectiveness from efficiency, configure that the company's goal is achieved and not productivity itself. Áureo, thank you very much for your presence. We are just delighted to be able to have you on our program.
Thank you very much, Carlo. I am the one who is extremely satisfied and honored to be invited to a program like yours.
Let's start, Dr. Villagra, with what most comes to our minds when we are going to talk to you. Theory of constraints. How can we help our listener who is not familiar with the topic to understand what this theory of constraints is?
So, Carlo, I like that you mentioned Peter Drucker in the intro, right? For me, I think the corollary of Drucker's work was when he said there at the end, right, that deep down knowledge was a commodity in management. The difference was having the courage to use it and do what needed to be done, right? And that's how Tosi was born, right? We call it Toki here. I've been building this in English. It's not Toti because Toti is obsessive compulsive disorder, okay? But the theory of constraints was created by this guy behind me, Dr. Eliyahu Goldratt, right? Over 40 years ago when he released a book called The Goal. And he was a scientist, right? He was a physicist who worked on factory floor scheduling, those kinds of things at the time. And that was when operations research emerged, computers, right? He realized one thing, Carlo, the more sophisticated the solution, the less result it delivered. So as a good scientist, what did he do? He takes a step back, sees the system as a whole, and understands the cause and effect relationships within that system. Because of that name, the guy was a physicist, so game theory, theory of relativity, theory of constraints. What he realized is that any system, no matter how complex it seems, its final result is deep down, governed by a few elements, by the system's constraint. So that's where the name theory of constraints came from, and a series of applications that were developed after that, Carlo.
Áureo, it's impressive that after 4 decades or more since the release of the book, The Goal, it is still so relevant. I still remember when I was a student, which was a long time ago, when this book appeared and started to captivate the thinking of economists and administrators, but it is still relevant today. Yeah, why does it continue to be so relevant even after so many new management theories that have emerged since then?
Carlo, we met on Monday for lunch. I was coming back from Japan, right, where we held a big conference there, just with Tosi case studies from around the world. And a video was shown there precisely featuring Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, like the CEO of Tesla, right? The founder of Instagram, a series of people who are super, in vogue nowadays, bringing innovation, bringing a lot of new things, right? And using and referring to the goal as the origin of everything, right? The Goal was written as a novel, right, Carlo? So at the time, imagine, more than 40 years ago, it was a huge innovation to write a business book in the form of a novel. Now, the concepts it brings, despite being applied in a production environment, right? The concepts of focus, of of understanding system performance are used in a very wide variety of applications and of different environments, right? And believe it or not, Carlo, exactly what you said, with so many things being created, so many new theories, so many new technologies. It started, right? Back in the time of de Gaulle, it was robots, right? Then came Industry 4.0. We are now living through artificial intelligence. This almost inevitably leads us to a tendency to overcomplicate, to try to make things more complicated than they are. And deep down, Carlo, I think the goal brings this mindset, understanding what we call in TOC, the inherent simplicity of any environment. That's why it always remains so relevant, because it pulls us back to the focus. Man, what is the basic stuff? What do you need from this system? How does it work? And really, it is quite relevant even today. It's a super bestseller, translated into, I think, practically every language. It's in dozens of countries, several million copies sold already, Carlo.
On this point that you address with great expertise, right? There is a central point, which is the bottleneck, the constraint in companies. Áureo, yeah, how could we really understand this within a company? What is the importance of what the goal brought us by raising this point as so fundamental to a company's success?
So, Carlo, since we are here in an audience, right, of economists, people who understand mathematics, people who understand, right, how to measure a system, I would tell you this. The best clients are when we start by speaking directly to the CFO, right? If we often only reach someone in production who is very focused on increasing efficiency, etc., sometimes it takes a little longer than when we talk to someone who understands the business, as a value generation. And what is the key here, Carlo? It's in a nonlinear system. If it's a linear system, 2 plus 2 plus 2 equals 4. That's it, right? If I'm talking about a chain, for example, if I'm talking about the weight of the chain is equal to the sum of the weight of all the links. But if I'm talking about the strength of the chain, its resistance, that only depends on the weakest link in the chain. It's going to break at the weakest link, right? Then when we talk about a company, if we talk about cost seems like weight. If I have several departments and I cut costs in one department, I have cut the company's costs as a whole. But if I'm talking about profit, cash generation, or added value, then it's not quite like that. It depends on the interaction of all those elements, right? So this bottleneck is the thing that if I have more of it, I get more results. This bottleneck, Carlo, and here I'll have to lengthen the answer a little bit, okay, to make it clear, it can be physical. A machine is missing, right? Imagine I have a shoe factory. Cutting, sewing, and assembly. Cutting does 2,000 pieces per hour, sewing does 1,000 pieces per hour, and finishing does 1,500 pieces per hour. 2,000, 1,000, 1,500. What is the constraint? What is the bottleneck? Sewing. It's useless for me to increase productivity in cutting unless I hire people like the Hulk, and that very rarely happens because I won't increase production as a whole. But if I increase 1 minute in sewing, I've increased 1 minute in the system as a whole. So the constraint in this case here is the capacity of the sewing. It could be that there's a shortage of people. We did a big job here at Delta in the United States after the pandemic. Guess what was missing, Carlo? Pilots. A lot of people retired. A lot of people left when the market started to grow. How do you get experienced pilots back when you can't train them overnight? Sometimes the bottleneck can be raw material, right? I don't have enough raw material because a war broke out, there was a flood, there was some problem, and the supply chain is disrupted. I can't get enough raw material, okay? Once I was advising an economist, Carlo, a company that was it was in bankruptcy protection in Brazil, a small company a long time ago, where the suppliers wouldn't provide raw material. There were no wood panels to make the wooden furniture. What was the constraint? The wood panel. I had orders, I had production capacity. Sometimes the bottleneck is the market, right? I have the product, I have the capacity, but I don't have enough customers, I don't have a competitive advantage. Sometimes, Carlos, see if this makes sense to you. Since we are among economists, the bottleneck is a policy. And there's a story I love to tell, Carlo. I love telling this one. I visited the New York Stock Exchange last year, if I'm not mistaken, right? And I discovered something I had absolutely no idea about. What's the difference between the New York Stock Exchange and NASDAQ? I, like everyone else, thought, well, NASDAQ is geared, towards technology and so on. Yes, but why? That was never on purpose. It's because the New York Stock Exchange had a criterion for applying to go public, which was what, Carlo? It has to be profitable. It made sense, right? I'm not going to let a company that's losing money go public. But okay, so how does Amazon, which spent 10 years losing money, go public? How are all the tech startups going to go public if they aren't profitable yet? The economy has changed. There's a new dynamic. And that policy that made sense 20 years ago doesn't anymore. That policy was the real restriction of the New York Stock Exchange, and that's why NASDAQ grew. Today, the two are almost the same size. Evidently, the New York Stock Exchange removed that policy, but the damage is already done, right? The two are almost the same size. That is a restrictive policy, for example, right?
It's interesting, isn't it? And this understanding of where we are and where we're headed is essential when it's not related to our topic, but just to illustrate. When the current president was elected here in the United States and set out his platform, subjecting the economy to the interests of American national security, well, few people realized that this would completely change the economic landscape, not just locally, but globally. And many people didn't realize that this would imply changes in the relationships between countries, between economies, and so on. And then, logically, some more advanced countries thought that the United States was no longer interested in the economy. And the more backward ones like France, England, Australia, and China said, wait a minute, let's understand what's happening and let's participate in the new rule. But getting back to our topic here, which is what matters. How do you identify within a company, within a within a production segment, this bottleneck? How do you make it so that this TOC, right, can be...
Good morning, TOC, my friend Carlos. TOC, obsessive compulsive disorder.
TOC, exactly.
So sometimes it's something obvious. As I said, for example, if I have a constraint in production and I have a flow, a factory, where probably what is going to happen if I have a bottleneck, like a hose that got clogged, like a traffic intersection where a light, right, or a traffic signal is too slow, it will start to pile up inventory in front of it, right? Of course, right? The inventory will start to pile up in front of the bottleneck. Sometimes it's very easy to identify it this way when it's physical, but often the bottleneck is logical. As I said, it's a policy. It's a way the system works. So we have some tools in TOC that I'm going to go over very quickly now. Okay, Carlos? Where Goldratt developed what he calls the thinking processes, reasoning processes that help us understand the system. I teach a class at Washington State University, a course there in the MBA for engineers just on this TOC, thinking processes. There are 4 pillars, Carlos. The first is the following. There is inherent simplicity. Any system, no matter how complex it may seem, is governed by a few elements. So what do? Remember Dr. House, that American series, Carlos? Do you remember Dr. House? What did he do? A patient arrives and I don't know what the disease is and there are many symptoms. Well, we have a premise, right, Carlos? I can't have many diseases. So you take those symptoms and we call this in a company, undesirable effects. Sales are falling, inventory is too high, costs are rising, the customer is complaining, deadlines are whatever it may be. List the undesirable effects and start with the why of the why. You will see you can do this with a child in a halfway house. It's a book there, one that my wife even tells this case, right? The reasoning is very simple. If you do the why of the why, you will arrive at a few causes, Carlos, not many causes. And this cause is usually the logical constraint of the system. That is, instead of trying to improve all the undesirable effects, you have to discover what the root cause is. And if you identify that root cause, the mode of operation, etc., and act there, that is the logical constraint of the system. Does that make sense, Carlos?
No, it makes sense, but then another reality comes into play. In general, management is composed of various egos, right? So simplifying the issue. What is the importance of management in the sense that when you arrive at this cause, you will see that there are people who don't accept it, people who do accept it. So leadership and management, how does it help? What does it have to do to overcome the TOC?
Yeah, that's a great question, Carlos, for the following reason. I talked about science, right? And sometimes we think that science is just math, just doing calculations. But the Newton himself, if I'm not mistaken, he used to say the following, or Einstein, one of the two, okay? Science is not seeing, is believing. First, it's believing is seeing, you create a hypothesis, and you will use the scientific method to test the hypothesis. So intuition is also important, Carlos. The way I communicate, the way I understand other people's premises and see why they agree or disagree with me is extremely important. I mentioned, for example, I said there were 4 pillars of Taki. I mentioned the first one, inherent simplicity. Many undesirable effects, few basic causes. But there is the third pillar that says the following, Carlos: people are good. There is always a win-win-win solution. If someone is having a lot of trouble understanding something or seems to be against me, attacking me, or there's an ego clash, if we can make explicit the premises upon which the other person is basing their argument, then it's that old story, right, Carlos? Shut up and listen. It's not about me listening to prove my point. It's about me listening, asking more questions to understand what the other person is saying. If I understand the premises the other person is basing their argument on, then I will challenge the premises, not the person. I won't assign blame. If we try to find culprits, we create conflict. If we identify inadequate premises, if we give others the opportunity to understand and discover for themselves that that premise isn't the best one, we can achieve change much faster.
Well, let's move on to another challenge. Well, sorry, I'm going to pick your brain as much as possible today, okay? AI. This new revolution is emerging in methods, in knowledge, anyway, in everything. And in the same way that a few years ago, each person would receive a person selling software saying that software was the solution to the problem. In the end, the software didn't talk to each other. They hindered more than they helped within the company. Today, AI emerges, which is fantastic, right? But the companies are still fumbling around. What is the relationship between AI and problems? Can you get into AI before solving the problems? This technology, it's new, right? Will it be able to overcome the problems, or do you have to solve the problem first?
Wow, Carlos, AI is worth a whole program just about that, honestly. Because there's a difference. No, it's true. There's a difference from all other technologies, in my opinion, okay? As I said, when the Industrial Revolution came along, things changed dramatically, right? When the internet emerged, things changed dramatically. When Industry 4.0 emerged and so on. The problem with artificial intelligence, or the opportunity, is the speed and the scale at which all of this is going to happen. So today, taking too long to understand its impacts is worse than not understanding the impacts that the government can have on the economy with a new policy, as you mentioned, right? We have to understand it very quickly. I would say that the opportunities are immensely large. I mentioned, right, Carlos, when we were there, that we spent almost all our time in Japan when we were outside the conference with the global partners just talking about AI, because it's a lot of opportunity and a lot of threat at the same time. And if we really stop to think about it as advice for companies in general, well, there is honestly a lot of inadequate use going on out there, Carlos. It is quite a widespread issue. Putting AI, artificial intelligence, where it's not needed, that is solving problems that don't add anything to the business, or often in a misguided way, right? Or even more, the worst effect, in my opinion, but this is quite personal. There are so many executives handing over so much to the hands of AI, of artificial intelligence, right? The problem solving, that we start to lose intuition. It starts to become a black box and people don't think anymore, So we use it a lot. I use it directly. I have all of them. You can imagine I have them here with me, right? But it's an assistant, right? It's almost like a pocket brainstorm, but the curation is always ours, right? What is being said, why it is being said, and how I am going to use that. Now, the impact on business, Carlos, is brutal. Look at the impact on the software industry, right? Look at what it was, I don't know, a few years ago. A Python programmer was worth gold. You'd see, my son, what are you going to study? Go study programming, data engineering. It's over. The market has simply ended, right? I do that with my iPhone programs today, right? So look at the impact of this, right, Carlos?
and but going back to the company, so AI actually it can be useful in identifying the bottlenecks or the bottleneck itself, or do you first have to discover the bottleneck through intuition, through logically, scientifically, and then apply AI? How does the chicken and egg question come into this?
Now you're being very specific, right? Using artificial intelligence to explore the concepts, talk. We have, right, a second brain, our entire body of knowledge, helping to train new consultants and even some analyses that we do. But I would say this, Carlos, what is let's say the danger of this? We're seeing a lot of clients or companies in the market, they upload all the talk books, put them in there, take case studies, and ask ChatGPT to tell them what the solution is, and summaries come out, and the guy thinks he understands talk because of that, right? It's impressive, isn't it? AI will reach a point where it will even replace consultants, right? A more traditional consultant could be replaced. But I would say this, it's still a long way off. We use it for analyses we do in TOC regarding flow, project management, inventory turnover, a series of things. We use artificial intelligence to perform the analyses, but it is very much an auxiliary tool for those who understand TOC and who might be watching this, right? My advice is not to think that just because we upload all the books and many case studies, AI, artificial intelligence, can actually provide appropriate answers. Why do I say that, Carlos? Because the ABCs of talk, okay, sometimes it's a mathematical question, right? The bottleneck. But what we call breakthrough thinking, right, which is innovation, which is looking at the system in a different way, yeah, artificial intelligence isn't doing that well yet. It's very far from doing well what a good consultant does.
Wonderful. I'll ask you for 15 seconds for our commercial break, and we'll be right back.
Let's do it.
For over 20 years, the Leaf Ferreira de Araujo law firm has been providing quality, customized services to professionals, business owners, and investors coming to the United States. It also represents with excellence companies employing foreigners on a temporary or permanent basis. We understand that each client's case is unique and requires a specific approach. We maintain clear and objective communication with the client. Get in touch to find out more. leaflaw.com.
Let me interrupt you, Carlos. Can I interrupt you?
Sure.
I'm going to have to do something here. The Araujo from the firm is Rodrigo Araujo, who is the guy who did my green card. I did my green card with them. With Rodrigo, we got EB1. Yeah, if you look at it, you'd think you have to be a Nobel Prize winner in physics to get the EB1, which is for special abilities, right? But there are criteria and such, and they are really very good. You couldn't have found a better sponsor in terms of really someone you can rely on.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. It really is a firm that we have been using a lot because they are competent professionals, right? And serious.
Very, very serious.
Well, getting back to our main topic. Yeah, in terms of international trade, you are someone who has traveled the whole world. You are responsible for the company in the Americas, right? In terms of international trade, what does this theory, the talk, have to do with it? How can it help to find the constraints? Break this topic down a bit more, because a good portion of our listeners are in this phase thinking about it. They are already in it, and they don't know, and often they don't know why it's not working out.
No, yeah. So, yeah, of course, right. Since we are an international construction company and have operations in Japan, India, China, Europe, the United States, etc., right? We experience this with some clients. And there are even books by Goldratt, if I'm not mistaken, The Choice, which he uses cases, and one of the cases he calls Big Brand, right? Which was a company that was heading towards this. It needed to discuss, should I invest a lot in marketing? Should I invest in service? How am I going to get on the shelf, etc., and so on? So a strategy exploring the constraint to be more effective, right, in this internationalization. But I would even say instead of foreign trade, just if we think about international business, right, of all kinds, Carlo, I would say there are some basic things, right? There's the regulatory, tax, and legal issue, right? There's the issue of market information, and there's a lot about the cultural issue. And I watched some of your programs. You use that quite a bit, right, Carlo, the cultural issue as well. And let me even mention, right, Carlo, we met at Lead Orlando, didn't we? Why is it important to participate in a lead, right? if we are talking to Brazilians who are also coming here, right? Because it precisely facilitates that. How do I arrive in a new place and manage to sit down with distinguished people, with serious companies that allow me to understand, right, and accelerate business in a productive way? When we go to a foreign country, a country outside of our own, right, there are many opportunities, but there are also many threats. How do I understand how things work? What is worth doing or not? How do I get into that new dynamic, right? I've also lived in Portugal, and we think, right, Carlo, that leaving Brazil and going to build in Portugal, oh, it just has a slightly different accent. Man, it's completely different. Just to give you an idea, Carlo, I used to sign with a red pen back then because it was a tradition at my consulting firm. In Portugal, signing with a red pen is like telling someone to get lost. I won't use the exact word, which is different, but it's like telling someone to get lost. I was signing proposals with a red pen. So imagine from cultural idiosyncrasies like that to much more important issues of market dynamics, right? Information and knowledge, in my opinion, when we think about international business, is by far the main constraint.
Yeah, you're right. International culture it's so diverse and it still remains, right? Imagine arriving in Saudi Arabia with your wife, or arriving in Jordan and getting upset because a guy gave you a kiss, right? These are things like that simple. Now imagine in terms of business structure, right? That's where things get much, much more complicated.
Like how to negotiate in Japan, right? Eli Goldratt used to say, Japan is not another country, it's another planet. In a good way, we love Japan, right? My daughter left the company. She's still there. She likes Japan so much that she extended her stay and is still there working at night and enjoying the day there. But it's such a different culture that it's hard for us to get into the swing of things and start adding value and doing good business, right?
Let's try to see if we can help our listeners. What is the main piece of advice, or one of the pieces of advice, that you would give to these business owners who say they are working more and more, earning less and less, and who can't seem to grow?
Look, it's obvious that my main advice would be read a little bit more about TOSI, try to get informed because it helps a lot, right? But why? Why would I say that, Carlo? The main thing, and it was there in the introduction of the first edition of the book, The Goal by Eli Goldratt, okay? The key for us to make a better world, for us to make businesses more effective, is to take a step back, just like I said at the beginning in Peter Drucker's corollary. Look at the world as it is. Understand the cause and effect relationships, how things work, not how I would like them to work. That is, to have the courage to challenge our basic assumptions about reality, including about my company, about my employees, about my competence. Then once I understand how the system works and what the rules that govern the system are, then I can determine my goal and what the way to get there is. And to do that, Carlo, the key is focus. Eli Goldratt used to say that if it were necessary to, summarize TOTI in one word, it would be focus. Understanding what really moves the needle and improving that first, not trying to improve everything that can be improved. Perhaps one of the biggest myths of productivity, if I may say so, Carlo, is imagining that everything has to work well. I have to eliminate all waste, that all my machines, all my resources, all my people, the more they work, the better it will be. I like to use the firefighter analogy. Carlos, you know how a firefighter works, right? If I have a fire, I want them to be extremely effective and come right now to solve the problem. But if there isn't one, don't create one for me. Just read the newspaper. There's no problem at all. Our business resources are often just like that. They have to be available to solve the right problem at the right time with a focus on the customer. Competitive advantage for TOSI is identifying an important relevant limitation in my market and being much better at it than my competitors, solving my customer's problem in a way that no one else does. My resources exist for this to add value to my customer. In other words, my job as a manager isn't to make better use of my assets, right? I have idle assets. How do I use my assets? How do I improve OEE? It's how do I solve my customer's problem using my assets? This completely changes the way the question is asked, Carlos. Do you agree or not?
No, I agree. Actually, I'm remembering a video you sent me where the professor is sitting there in a little chair and the student comes to tell him that he increased his company's productivity that he automated it, right? And after several questions, right, he didn't even know how to say what the company's goal was. Can you give us a summary of that? Because I found that video so interesting.
Yeah. Why the book, the main book, guys, in Portuguese is this one here, The Goal. It's a novel, right? He was a manager of a company, of a factory in a conglomerate that wasn't producing results, and he received the following: "You have 3 months to give me results, otherwise I'm closing the factory." Wow, 3 months? What do I do? So he starts, right? That video I sent you is like this. He has nothing left to do. He goes after a professor who had taught him TOC, meets him at the airport, and he starts giving him tips. But what is the goal of your company? Oh, it's to increase productivity. But what is productivity? Oh, we installed robots. Oh, cool. Did you sell more because of that? No, not exactly, because it increased productivity in only one sector. Ah, okay. And did it lower inventory levels significantly? Well, not exactly, because we increased production so much that inventories actually went up. And did it decrease operating expenses? No, not that either, because now it costs more. It's more expensive to maintain the robots. So that productivity is just a number. We either sell more or earn more from sales, or spend less, or significantly reduce working capital. These are the metrics. If what I'm doing isn't impacting these, it's not productive. My company's goal is to grow in sales, to have more market share, or to significantly increase profitability, to produce cash flow. Any action that brings me closer to that goal is productive. It doesn't matter what the KPI says, what the indicator report says. If I'm not getting closer to that goal, it's not productive. It's as simple as that.
That's very good. You showed the book The Goal there, right? Which logically
A novel just
was required reading. Do you have any other reading recommendations?
So look, The Goal is the Bible. Guys, my kids read it when they were 15. I made them read The Goal. My wife read it. It's one of the books I'm going to recommend. She started working on personal development, developing the same methodology. The goal is for everyone. It's not about production. It's a way of thinking. This issue of focus, the goal delivers what is the framework of the 5 focusing steps. It's really worth reading. You can read it in 2-3 weekends. This little book here, the Marco, it's from Efrat Goldratt, who is Goldratt's daughter, right? And it talks more about projects, about project flows, whether in IT, a new airport, or a personal project of yours, right? The Goldratt wrote some books in the past called Critical Chain, for those who know it. But after so many implementations, right? Efrat wrote this here. It was released in Portuguese just now, last month. 2 months ago, I was with her in Brazil launching the book. It's been available in English for quite a while, okay? Goldratt's Flow Rules. As a lead, right, since I'm your colleague there, I'm from the retail vertical, I can't help but give Goldratt's retail book, right? Isn't it obvious? It's as if it were the goal written for a retail company. How do I apply the same concepts when the goal is to increase inventory turnover, right? To have more availability, the right mix for my customers with the lowest possible inventory, right? And this book here, by pure coincidence, it's by my wife, but that's not why. It's not nepotism. It's just that the book is really good too, okay? Marta wrote it, right? Based on TOC. She's an executive coach and works with leadership today, right? Business leadership. Think clearly and use and act with focus. The same concepts we just talked about for a company applied to an executive in terms of career planning, in terms of personal life. How do I use these TOC concepts for that? These books provide a good, let's say, overview of various applications, because TOC nowadays, Carlos, is a quite large body of knowledge. It has many different applications, but deep down, it's all a way of thinking, looking at a complex situation, seeing what determines the result, and deciding how I manage the system, whether it's my personal life, my marriage, my company, my soccer club, the church, so that it achieves its goals faster.
From what I can see, TOC has influenced your life quite a lot, actually. How did it influence it so much?
So, Carlos, in my past lives, I was an electronic engineer, you know? I'm from Rio Grande do Sul, right? I studied electronic engineering and worked at Siemens, you know, in Rio Grande do Sul, in Porto Alegre. I produce integrated circuits, transistors, etc. And one day, while doing an MBA, what did I read? The goal. Oh, what an interesting thing. It's very simple, right? I swear to God, Carlos, I swear, that this isn't just consultant talk. 2 weeks applying the concepts, I had very good results at the company, right? At the semiconductor factory, cutting WIP in half, reducing lead time to 30%, etc., etc. Then they sent me to Manaus, to the free trade zone, Coelma, right? Electronic components type to apply the same concept. And a friend of mine saw me. Man, you're not a coach, an executive, you're a consultant. He introduced me to a company from Rio Grande do Sul, right? The Fokin Foundation by Harry Fokin, which worked a lot in the footwear sector and so on. I went there, right? Became a partner in the company, grew. We opened a branch in Portugal. That's why I lived in Portugal, which I told you about. Then I returned to Brazil, took on big companies like Riachuelo, worked directly with Flavio Rocha, etc. Then Eli Goldratt came to Brazil to launch the book for retail. That's how I met him directly. It was the first time I met Eli Goldratt in person. And I've always really liked governance. I work a lot with boards of directors when the bottleneck is there at the top, right? To make the right decision, to put focus on management, family business, or even a large corporation. I was on the board of some companies, Tritec from Santa Catarina, Piccadilly, Calçados Piccadilly from Rio Grande do Sul. And I took these companies to Israel to meet Eli Goldratt in person. The relationship began. He ended up inviting me to join Goldratt. I joined Goldratt, became a global partner, and that was the story. All because of reading the goal, just that. Read a book, and it's not just me, okay? There are these stories, of many, many people, Jeff Bezos at Amazon with the fulfillment system, etc., reading the goal. It really is a very powerful book, guys. I truly advise everyone it's worth it. There's no way to regret it. And I told you I'm going to send you one as a gift, right, Carlos?
Wonderful. And tell me one thing. You mentioned several examples from industry. Do the top concepts only apply to industry or to services as well? I saw that you already have a book just about retail. What is the...
Retail, hospitals, schools, right? Large hospitals in Rava, in Rio Grande do Sul, Hospital Mãe de Deus. Folks, think about clinics. Yeah, like take Carlos, for example. Whether it's a small company or a massive corporation, right? It could be a brand new startup, any kind of human initiative, really, a local soccer team or even a government agency. It all applies. We have huge projects here with the state of Utah in the United States, the whole planning and operation part. DevOps is actually being implemented. They are using TOSI within the American Air Force, right? The specific name has completely escaped me for the moment, but it is definitely the defense agency, right? They are dealing with that whole massive turnaround process, and it is quite a significant undertaking for them. Network of American air bases, the American Army uses a lot of talk in Japan with disasters. In Fukushima, all that disaster that happened there, it was using TOSI, the city's recovery, right? TIOC for education. There are many applications for using this thinking process that I mentioned for children from 7 years old and up. How do I think better? Cause and effect. How do I deal with dilemmas, right? How do I have what Goldratt called an ambitious goal? How do I manage to set a target, stretch the goal, as Marta says, right, in coaching, right? And it has bigger horizons. So the application, Carlos, is really very broad. And the good news, and I say this to encourage your listeners, right, so they learn more, is that it's very easy. There's a lot of material available. Talk to You will distribute everything that's necessary, okay? Because regardless of the size of the company or whether it's a business, a construction company, no, we really want to spread this more and more, right? Because we really believe in this. Yeah, even for the individual, right? For someone's personal career. That's why I mentioned Marta's book, right? Any situation Eli Goldratt wanted to say can be improved, not even the sky is the limit. Can I ask you to wrap up the 4 concepts and the 4 pillars? Inherent simplicity is the first one. People are good is another one. There's another one that says that any dilemma can always be evaporated if there is a solution, a common goal. So if I have a shoe store, since I mentioned shoes, to have a good shoe store, I have to protect sales. To protect sales, I want to have more stock so I don't run out, but I want to protect cash flow. To protect cash flow, I want to have less stock to free up cash. So, okay, I want to have more stock and less stock. These are two contradictory actions. It seems like a dilemma. The traditional solution is the trade-off, staying in the middle of the road. In TOSI, we believe that staying in the middle of the road is a great way to not protect either side well. So there is a pillar of talk that says any dilemma, if I challenge the basic assumptions that are in these little arrows I drew in the air, I can reach a much superior balance. This is the other pillar. And the last pillar, Carlos, says the following: never say I know, never say you already know. Any situation can be substantially improved, not even the sky is the limit. But for that, I have to challenge the basic assumptions. I have to keep thinking that it can be better. If I think I already know everything about a situation, I stop thinking. I don't challenge the assumptions. I won't keep growing. This advice is very important. I would leave it, if you allow me. I don't know if the answer is too long, but let me say two little things here as a contribution. Two extremely strategic questions in TOC that you can ask your child, you can ask your wife, you can ask your employee, your partner, your client. What is very difficult, Carlo? Almost impossible, but if it weren't, it would change everything. Wow, that is my dream come true. This here is worth changing much more than everything else. Remember? The one that moves the needle? That is the first question. And the second one is the following. Okay, it's very difficult, almost impossible, unless, and that's when we start the famous thinking outside the box. If we have this mindset, believing that it is possible, right, to overcome limits, that there is no limit to the power of human thought, even with AI. AI is here to help us, not to replace us. Not even the sky is the limit, Carlo.
No, perfect. So from what I understand, TOC applies to large companies, medium-sized companies, and individuals. So small and medium-sized businesses are among those that should, not just can, but actually should, with even more reason, use TOC, right?
Goldratt loves small businesses. Do you know why, Carlo? Because TOC is about systems thinking. When we go into a large multinational, we have a certain amount of work to do to reach the top and be able to touch the company as a whole. But when you are in a small company, when you are in a medium-sized company, no one thinks more about the system as a whole than in this size of company. There is even a better chance of making good use of the powers that talk can bring.
You know, back in my day, a long time ago, we used to complain at the university that we only learned everything related to large-scale business systems. At the time, there weren't even any books on managing small and medium-sized businesses. The first one I had the opportunity to come across was The Method, which, by the way, I bought a fair amount of at the time and gave to every client of the bank I was running.
Man.
So they could in some way see that the small business really had a solution. The more they read, the less they needed the bank. And the less they needed the bank, the more money they would make. Because the bank isn't necessarily a generator of opportunities. It usually absorbs a substantial part of the profit. And by removing the bottlenecks, the company really gets closer to better results. Yeah, let me now ask you for one last favor. To give like a final perspective on this interview of ours. What specific advice or guidance would you offer to a business owner today so that when they walk away from this interview, they feel equipped with a concrete, actionable, and tailored solution that will truly benefit both them personally and the future growth of their company? Could you walk us through that?
I think there is this common perception that the word focus is actually a bit overused these days, right, Carlo? But honestly, I believe that focus is still a very, very important thing to cultivate. Try to see what first you really need to have a clear sense of your ultimate goal before you can truly commit to the process of focusing on it. And the goal isn't just what the company's sales objective is, right? What is really your business objective, your objective as an executive, right? Your purpose. Both the company must have a proposal, a mission, and those who are inside it, a mission and values. If your personal values, the ones you really believe in, are not in agreement with the company's values, with the company's mission, you have a problem at the end of the day. Why am I so passionate about talking about this? I imagine you can see, right? that I'm not memorizing anything, that I live what I'm saying, because there is 100% alignment between what Tosi teaches, what I do with business owners, and what Marta does with executives. It's all very aligned. When we achieve this, we enjoy what we do, and then we do it even better. So what is the goal? Where do you want to get to, and why? Now, what really determines the pace, the speed at which you reach that goal faster? If you can identify that the question is simpler now, what is limiting this growth, right? If that's what I need, why don't I get there faster? What is really making me accelerate this? There are things we have to do for compliance because life requires us to do them. But put 20% into the obligations we didn't choose to do, and put 80% of your managerial attention, which Eli Goldratt said is the ultimate constraint, into the rest. It's not time. It passes the same for us, at least at this speed, right? It's what we do with it. 70% of your time and your managerial attention should be spent working on those factors that determine the speed at which you will reach your goal. It might seem a little theoretical in a live stream, but if you stop to think and do an exercise, put it on paper and write down what I'm saying, things start to become clearer.
Well, I just want to say thank you so very much, Áureo Villagra. You are truly a great consultant and honestly a person of such fantastic simplicity in your communication style, but at the same time, you possess such fantastic efficiency and real effectiveness in everything that we have been able to learn from you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much again for accepting this invitation. And let's come back to go into some details, please, because it really is the bottleneck of the program is time. So we have to find a way to make better use of it on other occasions.
That's great. It was a pleasure, Carlo. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Okay. And the same to you. Well, dear listeners, surely each one of you is already turning to acquire or reread this fantastic book that I had the opportunity to discover so many decades ago and which remains so current for bringing efficient results necessary for our business activity. I hope to continue counting on you for our next programs, which will surely be as interesting as this one, where we had the opportunity to talk with Áureo Villagra, who is considered one of the greats, yes, and is the idol of all those who seek to improve their business success. Good night to everyone.